Tonight's call is about early life exposures, microbiome seeding, and long-term health. And I think this topic is important and hopefully interesting to anyone, not just people who are of childbearing age or want to have kids soon or have kids, but pretty much anybody, because A, this could help you understand your health picture in ways that you may have never thought about it before. And B, even if you don't have kids, don't want kids, are never going to have kids, I'm sure you know people who have kids, want kids, or are currently pregnant. So this information is relevant to all of us, and it's really paradigm shifting and should be paradigm shifting for conventional medicine, and I hope it gets there. But we'll let it be paradigm shifting for us, and hopefully we can be the leaders for that. So in my book, I talk about, early on in the book, I'm setting up my book for you, and I talk about how your health is a puzzle. I use the puzzle metaphor or the detective metaphor to help explain and help teach what I've laid out in my book. And this graphic is from the book, and the three main pillars of your health are your exposome, your epigenome, and your microbiome. Those three things combine to form you, or result in the puzzle that is you. Now, exposome is the sum total of your exposures lifelong. So your exposures to anything and everything, all of your exposures result in the output that is you. And included in those exposures are antibiotics, your diet, your physical activity level, your vaccine record, your glyphosate exposure, where you live, when you live, temperature, your parents' health heading into conception, all of these things. Every single second of your life, every single exposure has resulted in you. So your exposome matters because that includes lifestyle and environment, not just your genetic code. And so again, that should be paradigm shifting, because conventional medicine and pharmacology are all about genetics, whereas we've discussed many times in this group that it's really about epigenetics, not genetics. Genetics are the genes you were dealt by your parents. Epigenetics is how those genes are expressed and whether they're expressed. And expression is determined by environment, lifestyle, exposome factors. So exposome factors influence epigenetic expression, and the microbiome is one exposomal input, and the microbiome is also an epigenetic input. So we could have arrows going back and forth between all of these terms and representing their impact on you, your growth, your development, your health now, and your future health, and your past health. And this directly relates to the topic we're discussing today, which is the microbiome health as it relates to conception and everything moving forward from there. So here's the graphic again next to this study entitled The Epigenetic Lorax, Gene-Environment Interactions in Human Health. And in the blue box, I highlighted a couple areas because I want you to understand epigenetics. If you're going to get pregnant, if you're going to conceive a child and raise a child, or if you're not and you just want to get healthier, epigenetics are at the center of what you need to understand, because the reason you can change your diet and get healthier or get sicker, the reason you can change your physical activity levels and get leaner or less lean, the reason you can change your mind states and get healthier or less healthy, sleep patterns get healthier or less healthy, is epigenetics. It's the impact of those strategies or those choices and their result on genetic expression. So this study in the red box here, some environmental causes of epigenetic changes are lifestyle factors such as substance abuse, delayed reproduction, or say geriatric pregnancies is I think not a nice term that conventional medicine uses. Assisted reproduction technology, which would be fancy for, say, fertility treatments. Parenting behavior is an epigenetic input, right? If I'm constantly yelling at my kids, that creates a different stress level and a different self-esteem in that child than if I'm always telling them I love them and encouraging them. So these are all epigenetic inputs. And there's a large field of research that studies developmental origins and, windows of sensitivity to epigenetic expression, So epigenetics are happening all the time, but there are certain periods in development and the lifespan where they're more impactful and more important. And so periods of sensitivity include oogenesis, so development of ovarian eggs, spermatogenesis, development of sperm, pre-implantation development and implantation. So, the health of the woman in the uterus, pre-implantation of the fertilized egg, and then fetal life and all the way through perinatal, postnatal, and infancy. All of those periods are very fertile for epigenetic influence. And then the last box you can see says transgenerational effects also arise. So you are what you eat, yes. And we've also talked about before, you are what you eat eats too. So the health of the cow that you ate determines your health. But you are also what your mother and father ate or your grandparents ate. So again, if you are someone who is thinking about conceiving, I've often counseled, coached, recommended, whatever you want to say, couples who want to get pregnant soon. I always tell them, hey, do the best thing for your baby and get your health optimized before you conceive. And so, the shortest term window I would recommend is take 3 months to really optimize your health, optimize your epigenetics so that when you conceive, that child has the best input possible from mom and dad in terms of epigenetic expression input. If you go longer than 3 months, it's only going to be better for you because it takes time to turn over tissue, right? Basic physiology is the life cycle of a red blood cell is 120 days. So that's 4 months, so if the parents want to get healthier and completely remodel their red blood cells and start with say a healthier total volume of blood before they conceive, then 120 days of total dietary change, lifestyle improvement would result in, at conception, you've got a brand new blood supply that's a lot healthier than your blood supply was 4 months ago. And obviously, if your blood's healthier, your tissues are healthier. During those 4 months, you're turning over tissues at different rates. So leveraging epigenetics to conceive the healthiest embryo possible and then have that result in the healthiest child possible is, I think, important and should be taught to parents so that they know, hey, it's not just like, yeah, get pregnant, whatever state you're in, get as healthy as possible to create the best outcomes. Now, in my book, in chapter 8, I talk about developing oral tolerance. And oral tolerance, the concept of tolerance in immunology is regarding to your immune system's ability to recognize self versus non-self, or friend versus foe. So from the perspective of oral tolerance, it's your body's ability to, consume a strawberry and not have an immune reaction to it, right? So oral tolerance is lack of food reactions. If you're tolerating it, you're not becoming inflamed against something that should not elicit an inflammatory response. And so oral tolerance, I talk about, here's page 167, but there's multiple factors that influence oral tolerance from early on in life. And tolerance is determined by immune development, but immune development is highly influenced by gut microbiota and the crosstalk from our allied forces, which is our gut microbiome and our immune system. And so our gut microbiome is seeded through multiple pathways. One is direct seeding in utero. So we're going to get into a study here in a minute that shows that the uterus is not sterile. The fetus is not sterile. There's actually mother's microbiome is shared with the fetus in utero. So the first bugs that are in the baby's gut are actually mom's bugs. So mom wants to have a healthy microbiome, right? Then a vaginal birth versus a C-section birth is very important and makes a difference, and we'll see that. So when you're passing through the vaginal canal at birth, you're inhaling mom's vaginal flora. That's a seeding event for your gut. Those flora are swallowed, make it down to the gut, and help seed your gut microbiome. So if you're born by C-section, you miss that important exposure. And it's so important now that multiple studies have shown that, progressive hospitals are taking C-section babies and they'll swab mom's vaginal fluids with gauze and, seed the baby's mouth and nasal cavity with that, hoping that they inhale some and get some of that early seeding. Then breastfeeding. Breast milk and skin-to-skin contact provide the baby with seeding of microbes. So again, if we're not breastfeeding, if we're formula feeding, that impacts microbiome health. Formula-fed babies have different gut bug makeups than breastfed babies, and that can influence inflammatory levels. And then caregiving, oral transfer from kissing the baby and skin-to-skin contact. All of these are ways to transfer microbes and seed that baby's microbiome and support an optimal early immune development. And then in the red box here, you can see that secretory IgA is the predominant immunoglobulin class in human mother's milk. And babies are born with an IgA deficiency. Well, IgA is the main immunoglobulin or antibody at the surface of mucosal barriers. So thinking gut, lung, sinus, bladder, okay? We're born into the world with a deficiency in that. We get those IgA antibodies from breast milk. So again, if we're not breastfeeding, we go straight to formula, then we may be setting up babies for atopic issues like asthma, eczema, food reactions, etc., because essentially they're missing that first line of defense in their mucosal barriers. And it can result in the atopic march, which I've spoken about, I believe, on other calls, but it's in my book if you want to learn more about that. So lastly, in order for breastfeeding to be as effective as possible, mom needs optimal levels of vitamin A, omega-3 fatty acids, and probiotics. And we can talk more about that later. But this is the table from a study that I drew these seeding strategies from. And that's a study called Fast Food Fever from 2014 by Ian Miles. You can look that up if you'd like. But the study I want to spend the most time on tonight is this one entitled Microbial Contact During Pregnancy, Intestinal Colonization, and Human Disease. And this is a review paper that the authors did in Nature Reviews Gastroenterology and Hepatology. And they're looking at the interconnectedness of all this and showing that, hey, we should be thinking about parents' health heading into conception. We should be thinking about mom's health during pregnancy, mom's microbiome, mom's diet, mom's stress levels, because it directly impacts health outcomes in the infant, but also potentially long-term health outcomes, and may increase risk of allergy, autoimmunity, or metabolic issues like obesity and diabetes if the seeding of the microbiome doesn't happen correctly. So let's take a look at this, and I'm going to read to you because I think it's important, and we'll give commentary on it as well. But in talking about early sources of microbial contact, research advances suggest that the intimate interaction between the host and environment and indigenous microbes begins in utero. So in pregnancy, in fetal development, maternal immune cells have been reported to cross the placenta and modulate immune responses in the human fetus. So that could go one of two ways. If mom has a tolerant immune system, then maternal immune cells can cross the placenta and modulate immune responses in the fetus to promote tolerance and anti-inflammatory response. But if mom is inflamed and pro-inflammatory, activated immune cells, then that could promote a pro-inflammatory phenotype in the fetus, and now the baby starts life with a more hair trigger immune system compared to a more tolerant immune system. In addition, maternal immunological and metabolic state during pregnancy can lead to inflammatory immune activation. So that's what I was just talking about. This state also modulates the initial microbial inoculum for the newborn and breast milk composition, thereby affecting the stepwise microbial colonization in early infancy. So that's a mouthful that says the healthier mom's immune system is, the healthier mom's metabolic state is in terms of blood sugar regulation and all of that, then the healthier the breast milk will be. And if she's healthier, then her microbiome will be healthier. So the donation of microbiota that she gives to the baby will be healthier and more tolerant driving instead of pro-inflammatory driving. And so if you look at the graphic on the left, it just lays that all out. So you can see that mom's gut contributes microbes to the placenta, and mom's breast milk also transfers microbes to the baby, and skin-to-skin contact, the vaginal delivery. Each of these things are methods that we talked about earlier that contribute to healthy microbial colonization for the baby. Here's a different graphic to look at. It shows you the time span from, say, conception through fetal development, through birth and early infancy, and maternal factors that promote, healthy conception, healthy fetal growth is healthy nutrition for mom, well-regulated metabolics like blood sugar and thyroid and all of that, and healthy immune system. A vaginal birth is better than a cesarean birth in regards to what we're trying to accomplish here. And then breastfeeding is ideal as compared to formula feeding. And so the authors state, breast milk serves as the sole source of nutrition during the first months of life and could also be a source of colonizing bacteria for the infant gut. In addition, breast milk provides the infant with important protection against disease during the vulnerable neonatal period, right? So it's born with a leaky gut. The breast milk is providing the secretory IgA to help defend it against invaders during, postnatal birth, early infancy. The beneficial health effects of breastfeeding range from a reduced risk of necrotizing enterocolitis and infections of the GI and respiratory tracts in infancy to improved cognitive development and decreased occurrence of celiac disease, type 2 diabetes, obesity, high cholesterol, and asthma later in life. So breastfeeding impacts short-term outcomes in infancy, but also prevents chronic diseases that are rampant in our society later in life: celiac, type 2 diabetes, obesity, cholesterol issues, asthma. Due to its unique protein and oligosaccharide components, breast milk modulates the neonatal gut microbiome composition by promoting growth of bifidobacteria. So bifidobacteria should dominate in a healthy infant gut. They are the ones that drive tolerance and an anti-inflammatory microbiome response or microbiota response. If in the study they talk about breast milk fed babies compared to formula fed babies, and the formula fed babies have higher levels of E. coli and Clostridium and potentially pathogenic microbes than breastfed babies, which then impacts their immune response, their inflammatory levels, etc. In addition to providing a distinct inoculum for the stepwise microbial colonization process through physical contact with maternal, vaginal, and intestinal bacteria, vaginal delivery is associated with stress and hormonal changes during labor, which influence maternal gut permeability and neonatal immune physiology. So since the beginning of time, babies have been born vaginally. There's more to that process than we even understand at this point, but the more we learn, the more we realize, electively interfering with nature probably isn't the best choice to make, because we skip the seeding, we skip the stress of labor, which triggers stress response and hormonal changes and impacts immune function. We need these exposures. These are part of the exposome, right? And they have epigenetic influences for long-term health and microbiome influences. So it's that picture from my book we talked about earlier. So just, electively having a C-section out of convenience, for the doctor or whatever, that's inconveniencing the baby, likely short-term and potentially long-term. Interestingly, the importance of delivery mode on both gut microbiota composition and infant immune responses is detectable throughout the first year of life. So again, whether your vaginal birth or C-section isn't just impacting the baby in that moment. They're seeing differences throughout the first year of life. And they've also observed that the microbial composition of breast milk is different after vaginal birth compared to C-section birth. So again, if the breast milk components are different, then the baby's microbiome is going to be different, the baby's immune system is going to be different, and potentially their health outcomes. TGF Beta, we've all heard that, or most of you have heard that, because that's a factor I commonly test. So we're testing transforming growth factor beta 1 in the testing I've run on you guys. Transforming growth factor beta 2 is found in breast milk and is obviously similar to 1, but a little bit different. And so what TGF beta does in the breast milk is it's immunomodulatory, and it promotes tolerance. So it's promoting an anti-inflammatory, anti-food reaction, anti-asthma, anti-allergies, all that sort of response. TGF beta at a concentration corresponding to that in breast milk alters inflammatory responses and induces immune maturation in the immature human gut. So it's key in helping immune development. Mother's consumption of the probiotic Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG during pregnancy and breastfeeding increases the concentration of TGF beta in breast milk and is associated with reduced risk of atopic eczema in the infant. Boom. So mother taking probiotics while she's pregnant and breastfeeding promotes TGF beta in the breast milk, which promotes immune tolerance in the baby and prevents eczema. These authors hypothesized that breast milk might function as a vehicle to introduce tolerogenic microbes to the baby, which we've said multiple times. So supplementation with the probiotics increases TGF beta in the breast milk, promotes optimal immune function in the baby. So if you are pregnant, hope to get pregnant, this isn't necessarily mainstream and conventional obstetrics right now. So hopefully you're working with someone who is telling you as a mother, take your probiotics, get your prenatal vitamins, get your fish oil, that sort of thing. But if they're not, hopefully maybe give these articles to the person you're working with so they can help future moms. But these things are absolutely necessary, as I'm sure you can tell at this point. And so right here, the study says it seems that probiotic intervention is most effective if commenced prenatally, right? So the better mom's gut is, or the healthier mom's gut is going into conception, into fetal development, perinatally and then postnatally, the better baby's outcomes are. So the sooner mom gets healthy, the better the outcomes for the baby. And obviously the sooner mom and dad, because you'd like to be as healthy as possible preconception, you're going to make the best contribution to baby. So this last blurb at the bottom is just reinforcing the importance of probiotics, prenatally all the way up to breastfeeding and beyond. So altered innate immune gene expression in the placenta and fetal gut after prenatal maternal probiotic intervention was observed. What's that? Altered innate immune gene expression. So mom taking probiotics had an epigenetic influence or changed genetic expression of placenta and fetuses' immune genes. Boom. All right. Boom sauce. Perhaps more importantly, we have reported that maternal supplementation with combined probiotics, Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG and Bifidobacterium lactis BB12, from the first trimester to the end of exclusive breastfeeding reduces atopic sensitization of high-risk infants. So again, if mom starts probiotics from first trimester on, I'd say start before you're even pregnant, but from first trimester on, they found that reduces atopic sensitization. What's that mean? Atopy, eczema, asthma, food allergies, okay? Those sorts of things. If mom's microbiome is good, we're preventing those. Surprisingly, a statistically significant reduction of gestational diabetes was observed in women receiving probiotics compared to women who didn't. So if you're worried about gestational diabetes, get your probiotics in, okay? It's going to decrease risk of that. Furthermore, probiotic supplementation resulted in consistently improved plasma glucose concentrations and insulin sensitivity, not only during pregnancy, but also 12 months postpartum among metabolically healthy women. So probiotics helped moms deal with sugar and insulin better. And that a healthier metabolic state in mom, remember, promotes a healthier metabolic state in baby. Epigenetics. The same study provided clinical evidence that probiotic consumption reduces risk of maternal central adiposity over 6 months postpartum period. So look at that, ladies. We want to get our bodies, or you, not me, but you want to get your bodies back faster postpartum. Probiotics reduced central adiposity, or fat deposition around the waist, right? Or the fat, left over after baby's left, and that big tight belly's now deflated. So probiotics are promoting deflation of that balloon faster over 6 months postpartum. So this study, or this combination of studies and information I provide on this call, I hope has hammered down for you the importance of optimizing health preconception so that you can set your children up for the best long-term health outcomes possible, and therefore the best life possible. So let's open it up for questions here, because I know there's probably plenty. Let's dive in.
I do have a question.
All right.
Not for me, obviously, but so let's say we currently have 2 friends who are newly pregnant. And I will say this, that neither of them are, it wasn't great going in for either of them. And because they both struggle with different things. And so is there a point where, I know it's never too late, so it would be good to get started like on probiotics right away too, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because if, can you share, define what not good for either of them means?
Our one friend has type 1 diabetes.
Okay. So type 1 diabetes is autoimmune.
Yes.
So the likelihood is that that person's microbiome has been poor for a long time, or maybe that person was C-section, maybe that person wasn't breastfed. Like exposome factors combined to result in type 1 in that person. So that person, in all probability, needs probiotics for various reasons for their own health. But then again, as we've just talked about, for fetal health and optimal pregnancy and outcomes post-pregnancy.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Danielle, I see you there.
Sorry I was late. I had a doctor's appointment at 2:30 and didn't get back until now.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
A
Well,
new doctor.
You snuck in quietly, so
Yeah.
thank you for that. What else?
You work with pregnant women through their pregnancies at times, or?
Do I?
Yeah, obviously you're not an obstetrician, but just on the nutritional health side, for giving the probiotics and that kind of thing.
Yep. Yeah, and I have 5 kids, so I've worked with my wife a couple times. But yeah, I actually had a consult with a lady today who is having some fertility issues, and she said, can you help me, or will this help me, and all that. And obviously I can't promise anything to anybody. But at least, I could be a doctor with no kids, and that's different than me being a doctor with 5 kids in terms of experience, just life. let alone the health aspect of it. But then I think the count of functional babies I have is up to 11 now, which again is no guarantee to any individual person, but it's just cool that it can happen for some people. Like, get healthy, give the body what it needs, and observe outcome.
It's awfully difficult to try and get people to do the healthy thing.
Yeah, it is, because consistency is the only magic bullet. And we want to feel good yesterday, right? Even though it took 30 years to make me this in such poor health. So give me one pill that tomorrow I'll be ready. It just doesn't happen.
The information that you just gave, it's fascinating, because it's like some of it, we've heard, but when you put it all together like that, it's interesting. Like, we're sitting here, both of us looking at each other like, well, that explains that, with one of us was breastfed, one of us wasn't, and so you can see how this, like, the whole down the mountain kind of thing. It's like how it does, and it's amazing. It's all connected.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it works both ways, right? It's amazing and can be good for us, but then it makes me as a clinician like, oh, elective C-sections, like the fact that, and this isn't, if anyone's done one, it is what it is. Obviously you probably didn't have this knowledge when you did that, but the way that they just say, oh, pick a date and sort of thing, just for out of convenience, when it's like, you're creating life, and there's a certain way that it's always been done. And for us to interfere, like when we interfere with anything, the outcome isn't better than if we had done it naturally, if we can do it naturally. There's a time for C-sections, of course, there's a time for medications and all that, but to just out of convenience because of a shift change, at 7 I'm off, so let's just get that baby out of there. In my mind, that's borderline criminal, because you're butchering the woman. It's not like a C-section is minor surgery. And then you're completely changing immune phenotype for the baby just because shift is ending. What else?
If a baby is born via C-section, the best thing, because they had no choice, what is the best thing that you can do other than breastfeeding, which we all agree is great and what you should do? Are there other things you can do to ensure that child has a healthy immune system?
So the infant,
right?
So if you can get them to swab, like say the C-section had to happen because of some legit emergency or something. Okay, well, we want to swab mom's fluids and seed the baby as much as we can. And that goes back to having a birth plan. So when you enter the hospital, before the due date ever comes, you want to be as prepared as possible to do it the way you want to do it, because in the moment, mom might ask for something that she didn't want under sane mind, right? So, our first child, we were going to do a home birth. And so we didn't plan on transporting or anything like that, but our midwife said, well, it's prudent to have a birth, to meet someone at the hospital, have visits with them, have a birth plan that says, I do or do not want epidural. I do or do not want Pitocin. I do or do not want the baby to ever leave my site. I don't want to wipe it down right away. I don't want vaccines or what do you want? Okay. Because this is the plan we stick by. Because things happen. So that's a guideline to go back to. B, if mom's in pain, my wife has at our fifth birth, my wife was like begging for to go to the hospital and get an epidural, and I was like, no, because that's not what you want, and of course I look like the jerk, but the midwife too was like, no, this isn't what you want, you're just in pain, and so having the plan allows you to stick to something you might not stick to. It's like if you have a plan when you're traveling, you're less likely to go to McDonald's or buy something at a gas station, right? Same idea. If you have a plan, going into the pregnancy, you're less likely to veer off from and do something you didn't want to do pre-pain. So having that plan helps. And on that plan, you could say, hey, if we have an emergency C-section, well, we do want to swab mom's fluids, seed the baby. We don't want to wipe the baby down right away. So that, the baby comes out and has the white covering on it. That's actually moisturizing for the skin, has microbes on it, all of that. That's a skin seeding mechanism. And so we never wipe the baby down right away, we just goes right on mommy, and then we swaddle it with that stuff on it, get the feces off and stuff, but the actual vernix, it's called, we don't wipe that off because we want to let that soak into the skin and provide what it's providing. And then, sorry, Vicki, so probiotics, if mom's breastfeeding, that's awesome. If mom's not if mom's production is maybe not what we want it to be, you could get powder probiotics and put it on the nipple, put baby on, so baby's getting the probiotics right from the source there, plus getting whatever milk baby's getting at that feeding time. You could put probiotics, say there's no breast milk, you could source breast milk from other women, or if you're doing formula, you could put probiotics in the formula. Having pets is ideal because pets are bringing in dirt and dust and dander and all of that. So the immune system is developing tolerance to that versus, the hygiene hypothesis is like you're in the sterile home, and the sterile home doesn't expose baby to as many antigens. So the immune system is relatively naive compared to like babies raised on a farm or babies with a dog in the house. There's been lots of studies showing, farm raised babies or families with pets, those kids have less asthma and eczema and allergic type stuff than kids who are born, say, and raised in like Washington, D.C., where there's no grass and everything's sprayed down and all of that. And then, of course, nutrition and stimulation and all of that. Does that help?
Yeah, my grandson was born cesarean, and my daughter had tons of milk, and she donated milk, and she breastfed till he was almost 2.
Good. Perfect.
But she is incredibly sterile, which I try to tell her she shouldn't be. And now Sawyer has food allergies and eczema, and and she thinks that you should just not let him get dirty and don't let him get around anything because he's allergic to it. And so I try to change that with her, but that's not what doctors tell them to do.
Right. Of course.
So
so the exposome, right, is everything we're exposed to and everything we're not exposed to. So if you're super sterile and you're not being exposed, that's an exposomal input, right? By omission.
Right.
So, it's the research. So the C-section and there's different times that matter more or less for the epigenetics and the seeding. And so the research says that it's kind of divided, that you can catch up and get back to normal, and some says you can't, depending on the timing of all that. So the C-section sets them back, but she breastfed awesome. But the C-section changes the microbiome, compared to a vaginal birth. So it's like, it sounded like she did awesome breastfeeding. That she's in the top, 1% in terms of how long she went. So hopefully her lifestyle was healthy while breastfeeding,
Yes.
But now it's just, you got to start today. So maybe get him on, kids probiotics, and, like ideally you would get and this isn't a sales pitch for me, but get a workup to know what does he actually need, because as you know, allergies can be more than just the way you were born. You could have been healthy parents, vaginally birthed, breastfed, and still develop allergies. It's just not from the early life microbiome development, right? So figuring out why he's got the atopic issues and addressing those is the best way.
Okay.
Between the two, Which is better, to have a vaginal birth with an epidural or a C-section?
Ooh, I'd say vaginal birth with an epidural.
I mean, I've never had either, but I guess with the epidural, you still have, I guess you don't have the urge to push. I don't know, someone can help me out here, but so you don't have that stress per se as much as you would if you were doing it naturally, or how does that affect anything?
I think that's the hope. I've heard stories where the epidural, they did it too late and it didn't help at all, or they said they shut it. I have a friend who just had a baby a month ago, and they told her that they shut the epidural drip off, and they didn't. And so baby was born, and an hour later she couldn't feel her legs, so she had to stay in the ER an extra 2 hours till she could feel her legs again. So there's different anecdotes like that, but I think either way, if you say, let's say it's the ideal case, she got the epidural, so she couldn't feel the push or didn't have the pain, but as part of that, she couldn't feel the push as much as she would without the epidural. The baby's still passing through, baby's still getting the microbial exposure and everything. So I would prefer that. And my wife, so end that story, our first baby, she labored at home for 28 hours, was 6 centimeters and exhausted. And the midwife was like, it could be an hour, it could be 8 hours, but she's wiped. So we did transport. And ultimately she had an epidural. And at 32 hours, baby was born vaginally. But then we've had 3 home births out of the next 4. So 1 in a pool, 1 in a pool, 2 on the bed. And then the other hospital birth was supposed to be in a birthing center, but her water broke on the on-ramp to head there, but there's 40 more minutes. So I just did a U-turn because there's a hospital at our exit, and she was out in 20 minutes. So that was just, we went in, got in bed, and had a baby. So that, each story is different, but the closer to natural, the better. And I would say vaginal with an epidural is far more natural than a C-section.
Natural births are far better stories than a C-section birth. I feel. My friends who, crazy stories, but
and
good.
I don't, obviously I'm a male, but I've been a part of the 5 that we've had. And I mean, when the baby's here, it's like, there's no one in the world stronger than my wife, like she's superwoman. But then to watch her go through 32 hours on one of them, and she has back labor. So like, I thought my pecs were going to be huge because for 32 hours, every 3 minutes, I'm compressing her SI joints. Didn't work, but like, that's work for me. Her work was even more. And at 32 hours, she's exhausted, but it comes out and it's like, she's got a glow, and it's like, she didn't do anything. It's like, all that stuff is in the past. Look at this. Like, oh, Simba, it's awesome.
Exactly.
So yeah, props to any lady who does it. You guys are awesome.
And that's how it feels. If you gave birth to a lizard, that would be the most wonderful, beautiful lizard that God ever created. That's your lizard.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Well,
Yep.
I'm not ashamed to admit that I've had an ugly baby. And like, but even she looked like a pink pug when she came out, and it was like, oh, I don't know, but now she's arguably our prettiest kid. So it's just like, whatever, you're just thankful it's happy, healthy birth. And just the process is like, wow, God is amazing to coordinate and how this all happens. It's wild.
That's what we were just saying about your entire presentation, about how all of that is connected and how we are created and how it works together. Like, it's fantastic.
Yeah. My wife has said a couple times, she's like, I don't know how if you've had a baby, I don't know how anyone who's had a baby could be an atheist, because of just how you know, amazing it is. But is that your baby, Danielle?
It is my one and only.
That's right.
And after you give birth, whatever you have, the first thing you eat is the most delicious thing you've ever tasted. I don't know what happens, but whatever they give you, they gave with one of my births, the first thing I had was Skippy peanut butter. I don't eat Skippy peanut butter. That was the best peanut butter I ever had in my life. But to like go out and eat Skippy, you wouldn't say whatever. And the same thing happened with my girlfriend. I don't know what happens. I don't know if it's because you're burning so many calories or something happens to your taste buds or something, but I don't know if anybody else had that experience.
I remember the first dinner that someone brought me after Annalise was born. Someone from church, like that first dinner, being home and stuff. That was awesome.
Yeah. It's different
Dr.
than
B,
turkey
I
on white.
concur with
Yellow. Sorry, Janelle, you broke up. Say that
I
again.
concur with everything. Can you not hear? Oh dear. Concurring with everything you said about having a birth plan and everything. It's so important because there's going to be so much craziness that happens. And like, even like you talk in you can be on the same page with the doctor in the, during the prenatal visits, but once you get in the hospital, it's just, everything kind of changes. So we had one born in a blizzard and then a natural birth of twins. And it was like, the more research we did ahead of time, the better. But we, what was I going to say? Oh yeah. I didn't know as much as I wish I had known with the kids, but, the book I read while I was pregnant with the first is called, Real Food for Mother and Baby. And it talks about like what to eat, like before, during, and after pregnancy, even like in the first, second, and third trimester to help like target whatever's developing in the baby. So like a lot of fats the third trimester, like for the baby's brain and stuff. So that was something that was helpful for me. But one thing I was wondering, so they had us years ago taking folic acid, like a year before pregnancy, which I dutifully did, and now we know that's bad and it needs to be folate and everything. Are there, unintended consequences that have come from the folic acid? I feel like I kind of heard that, but what's your take on that?
The folic acid has to be metabolized and, detoxified, and there's multiple genes involved in that process. So, I'm sure it's plausible that negative things have come from that. Dr. Ben Lynch would be a better person to ask that to, because that's really his wheelhouse. So I'm sure on seekinghealth.com, you could probably find the answer to that. But if it's a question of folic acid or no folic acid, I think probably folic acid is still the right answer, because you need folate for the MTHFR gene to work, and that's needed for notochord development in the baby, which notochord becomes brain and spinal cord, so nervous system. So no folate at all compared to a poorer form of folate. I mean, I would think the folate is better than none, especially, if someone's got a genetic SNP there, then the susceptibility to being less efficient is there. So, yeah.
Okay.
But now, there's nothing you can do now, right? So now just use methylfolate until, now methylfolate, like we know now, when, I don't know that 10 years ago, 10 years ago, like methylation and all this was just kind of hitting the scene. So folic acid, that's all we knew, you know, but now if you're having a kid and if your doctor tells you get folic acid, no, get methylfolate. Because folic acid does have, you know, toxicity associated with it, whereas the methylfolate is the bioactive form that can be used right away. So now that we have the knowledge, if we're recommending folic acid, that's a fail. We should be recommending methylfolate.
And that's the same thing as folate, basically.
Yeah, it's a methylated version. Yeah, so it's folate just in a methylated form. It's the most bioavailable form. There's an intermediate form called folinic acid that's also better than folic acid. So folinic acid or methylfolate, but you know it's easy to find methylfolate, so I would just go for that.
Okay. And what probiotic, like, is there a certain kind or type of probiotic that pregnant women should be taking?
Yeah, so the study said Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG and Bifidobacterium infantis. So infantis, like infant, where to go? And so those are the specific strains. So it's the I'm sorry, I misspoke. It's Bifidobacterium lactis, BB12, and Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG. So those are two specific strains that have been studied to, you know, decrease risk of atopy and eczema, improve microbiome transfer with breastfeeding, decrease gestational diabetes, and decrease fat, you know, postpartum in the 6-month window. So those two specifically, because those have been studied, but there's a lot of different strains of Bifido and Lactobacillus. So in the supplement world, you could buy those strains individually, or you can find combo products. And if you look at probiotics, most of them have Lactobacilli and Bifidobacterium in them. Those are the most common contents of probiotics.
Okay. Is there one that you recommend, or?
No, I don't. I recommend getting them, but I don't have a favorite there.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question, not really related to children, but also just on the topic of microbiome and gut health.
Sure.
So I've been doing some reading recently on like water fasting, and how that can be like just a tremendous benefit to one's gut health. So is that like a topic you're, you know, familiar with? And, you know, do you have thoughts on that?
Sure. Well, do you have a certain time period that you're going?
I had read that like 3 days, you know, was a good reset period, but, you know, like a week would be even better.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So I've done, personally, I've done two different 3-day water fasts, and both times I wish I went longer. Just because, you know, 3 days is the hard part. You know, you get there and it's like 7's nothing after that. But yeah, so the way that it can be helpful, one, fasting is helpful because of a major reason fasting is helpful is because of a process called autophagy. And autophagy is a fancy word for self-eating, auto, self, phagy, eating. And so when you're fat, if you're consuming food, autophagy mechanisms are shut off. When you're fasting, autophagy mechanisms are on. And so what autophagy does is, you can picture it as like an intracellular house cleaning. So it's going to go through your cell and essentially cut the dead weight. So picture you're at work and, you know, those guys in that cubicle are basically dead weight, right? They're getting paid for you to do their work. You know, they're bums. So if you went through and house cleaned at your workplace, they'd be the dead weight you'd cut out. Well, autophagy is doing the same thing inside your cells. It's like, okay, these organelles are inefficient. We're going to cut these out and improve the efficiency of the overall cell, and say, pay these people more to do the work they've already been doing. It decreases intracellular inflammation, which is caused by inflammasome activation. Lots of nerdy words, but basically autophagy is decreasing intracellular inflammation, cutting dead weight. From a gut perspective, so that's happening everywhere in the body when you're fasting. And then the act of fasting, water fasting, you're cutting out all food inputs. And so our microbiomes are impacted. We basically select our microbiome diversity with our dietary habits. So, you know, you've heard me say, eat the rainbow before, eat green cabbage, purple eggplant, orange peppers, you know, yellow squash, because the more different colors we eat, those different fibers contain different polyphenols and flavonoids, which are prebiotics and nutrients for microbes, and different microbes have different tastes, just like we have different tastes. So if I only eat green salads that are spinach with tomatoes and, you know, yellow onion on them, then I'm selecting the bugs that like that, right? And I'm starving the bugs that wish I would eat some squash and orange peppers. So if we fast, water fast, we're basically starving them all for a short term or forever, whatever term you're doing. And so that would tend to promote.
Are you calling me?
No.
That's you on my phone.
Who? That would tend to. I can't see, it's too small. I'm not
Dr.
calling.
Bartemus.
No, it's not me.
Well,
So that would tend to, the water fast would tend to, you know, starve out all of our microbes at some point, not to a level obviously that's cleaning out your colon, but the lesser, say, well-established strains may take a hit there, and if those strains are pathologic, then that could be beneficial. And then lastly, autophagy promotes a Th1 immune response, which is our main antiviral, anti-cancer surveillance. And when we're pushing Th1, we're inhibiting a Th2, Th9, Th17, a mucosal immune response. So it kind of pushing the Th1 gives the GI immune response a rest. So those are various mechanisms that are likely at play behind the benefit there, and there's probably more.
so is there no big deal that you're not getting nutrients while you do one of those water fasts?
No, I mean, if you're doing it from a healthy state, like fasting is just another in a long line of, you know, fads, not from the standpoint that it's a fad that it doesn't work, but fads that, you know, it's first it's Atkins, and then it's keto, and then it's carnivore, and then it's fasting. It's like, you know, our culture goes through these things that they do without thinking about it. It's like they Dr. Google something and do it, and they don't consider their own exposome and epigenetics. They're just like, oh, I heard fasting's good, I'm going to do it. Well, if you're someone who's hypoglycemic, fasting's not going to end well for you, right? So we have to think about who's the person doing the intervention, and is this the right time to do that intervention? So fasting can be very healthy for people coming from the right place, but if you're, you know, starting it from the wrong place, it might make you worse. But from what I know about Arthur, I don't think that he would be hurt by the fasting. I think you're in a place, you know, where you could play with fasting and see how you do it.
It almost sounds like it would benefit me too.
It may. You know, we'll get your labs here shortly, but it tends to benefit the people at higher risk of being hurt by fasting. Tend to be the people who are more on the hypoglycemic and hangry side, because they're already living at, you know, a low blood sugar. Whereas the people who are more on the higher blood sugar, insulin resistant side benefit, because the fasting actually will improve insulin sensitivity, because it gives it gives insulin levels time to come back to baseline for the first time in maybe decades for people. So again, it depends on what's involved in the picture.
And did you just drink like electrolyte water or any special water while you were doing that, or did you just drink straight water?
I just drank straight water.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's variations. There's electrolyte water. There's people who do the master cleanse, which is like water with lemon and cayenne pepper in it. So there's different deals there, but I just took straight water.
And you took your normal vitamins as well, or?
I took the multi.
Okay.
But that was it. So like Danielle, to your question, that would be a way for me to provide nutrients without calories and without triggering the blood sugar response. You know?
Yeah, but I didn't think that like a multivitamin would absorb into your system without food.
Yeah, you'll get some.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, good question. I like it.
Talking about a water fast, I've got a couple questions too, but since we got on that topic, Misty and I, my wife and I, we've done Prolon a couple times, which is a fasting mimicking diet.
Yeah.
And it's a kind of an expensive program to do. I think for the 5 days for a box of it's like $200 maybe a person.
Mm-hmm.
But you can also get the book from Walter Longo, I think is his name. And he gives you a diet that you can make your own, fasting mimicking. I guess what's behind that is you can eat a certain amount of calories that are a certain type of food that act like a water diet. So if you're not wanting to be hardcore about water fasting, you can try that type of deal. I mean, Dr. Bartemus, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's something that we've done a couple times.
Oh yeah, no, I've spoken with them and read their studies, and I've even used their product a couple times, and it's good. And the research behind it is solid, especially in autoimmunity. So yeah, it's something to look into, Arthur, if you haven't seen that. FMD, fasting mimicking diet. And he uses, if I remember correctly, it's like soup broths and certain like wafers.
Yeah.
Yep, soups, hibiscus tea,
Elder.
like a little nut bar, but it's all broken up within the 5 days. I mean, it's certain different calorie levels per day and what you're eating, but I mean, it's pretty difficult. It's definitely not extremely pleasant, but it's better than nothing, I guess.
Yeah, I think for Arthur, anyone who's going to do it, I fasted 3-day water fast 2 different times, and they were different. The one time I planned on it, and that was like easier than I thought it'd be, just because I was planning on doing it. The second time I just ended up doing it because I missed I missed breakfast and lunch one day, so I was like, I'm just going to go 3 days. And so that was a little bit harder because I wasn't necessarily prepared. But what I learned is that I go to the cupboard a lot out of boredom, right? So when you can't eat, you walk into the kitchen and you're like, oh yeah, I'm fasting. You walk in there, oh yeah, I'm fasting. It's like, man, I waste a lot of time eating or going to the kitchen, out of boredom. So, if you're going to fast, have a plan. Like, okay, here's activities over the next 3 days I'm going to do, whether that's, sit down and write the book I've always wanted to write, or just whatever it is, but have a plan so that you're not sitting there thinking about how hungry and bored you are, because it's easier to break the fast that way. I think, and we're all different, like Bryce said, I think it's easier for me mentally to just say I'm not eating for 3 days versus have, a little bit of soup or something and like do that. So, first know thyself. But for me, I'm just going to say, nope, not doing it, and go.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat.
Cool.
Heck, I have breakfast, and as soon as I finish breakfast, I can't wait till lunch.
So you need fasting, just mentally, to show you can do it.
I do better without. This 3 meals was killing me.
Yeah.
I have something just before we have to jump off of here. I can't remember who it was last week who mentioned the mushrooms.
It's
It was
Patterson.
Patterson.
Okay, so just as an aside, and I can post this in the Facebook page for us, just as a quick aside, because I've been saving this for a few days, but Dr. Terry Walls, who is the big doctor, I went through one of her studies that has MS, and somebody asked about mushrooms, and this just happened to come up after we had this talk, and the biggest thing is why they can be they're so good, and she includes them in her protocol. But the problem is that they can actually be, here, let me find it real quick. They the problem with them is that most research done on the mushrooms is in the fruiting body of the mushrooms, and that's a later stage in the life cycle of the mushroom, and that gives it the best time to develop the medicinal quality, which is the beta glucans or glucans, however you say that. But because of time and cost associated with raising the mushrooms to that stage, a lot of manufacturers that have jumped on the mushroom train are growing an earlier stage of them called the mycelium on a bed of grains. And they're taking this grain combination with the mycelium, and that's what they're processing even in some of the elixirs. So it was just a warning to be extra sure about the company you're getting them from.
Yeah, thank you.
You could be getting stuff that you don't want in there.
Because your mushrooms might not be gluten-free.
Exactly. Right.
The heck.
Yes. And since we're going to be gone for a few Mondays, we're sorry we're going to miss you guys. And but I did have a question, and this was perfect. You know, for me personally, should I be on a probiotic? Because I'm not.
Yeah, it's a common question. So probiotics have effects even if they don't colonize. So even passing through, there's this concept called quorum sensing, where it's like they're on a luge through your gut, and as they pass through, they're shooting off text messages to the microbes in your gut, even if they don't colonize. And so that quorum sensing has impact. And then there's lots of different effects of probiotics, but ultimately what's going to determine colonization and long-term like seeding and prospering is your fiber intake, because the fibers are the prebiotics, right? And a few weeks ago, someone asked about symbiotics, which essentially is just a probiotic and a prebiotic in the same capsule. So you're taking the probiotic with the food that it eats. So I tell people, yes, a probiotic is likely to be beneficial for you, but between paying money for a probiotic and buying a broader and more diverse range of fibers, I'd rather you get those, eat that rainbow, and bloom out what you have,
Perfect. Great.
My mushroom thing, which I haven't done since I started Dr. Bartemus's plan, says mycelium and fruit bodies. Does that mean it's both?
Yes, that means it's both. You want something that should really just the fruit bodies, because the mycelium, technically that part could have been grown on a grain bed, but you can check that with the company that makes them. And then she actually lists the company that doesn't use that. But like I said, I'll post that. She talked about this. It's an actual whole mushroom, grain-free, high-quality product, because she uses it herself for her MS, but it's called Paleo Valley Neuro Effect. Paleo Valley Neuro Effect. But I'll post it in the Facebook page for us so you guys can see it.
Do you have the link? Do you have the link, Jennifer?
I do.
You can throw it in the chat.
Okay, I'll do that.
Everyone can just click on it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. We're going to sign off, but we're going to take our trip, and we'll miss you guys, and happy eating.
Enjoy.
Yeah,
travel.
travel safe.
Thank you.
Hey, if you want to brag on yourself for how you helped me because of the labs that you reported to me today, you go ahead and do that while we sign off.
Yeah, thank you. I'll let you do it.
That was his good news.
Yeah, Scott's crushing it, everybody. High fives to Scott.
Scott's crushing it.
There you go, Scott.
Good job. Hold on, don't leave yet.
He said Dr. B is crushing it.
Yay, Scott. Can you see that? Look at my
Yay,
screen.
Scott.
Yay. All right. Love you, Scott.
We love you.
All right. Travel safe.
Thank you guys for everything.
Yep.
Bryce, you had other questions?
Yep, I had a couple more. I've been, since I can't use, well, they hopped off, but I was going to say with the protein too, since I can't have any dairy and whey, I've been taking 4-sigmatics protein.
Okay.
It has a whole bunch of those mushrooms in it. So I don't know if that'd be an option for somebody too. But you mentioned glyphosate earlier in the presentation. That's always kind of been a devil that I've never really got my head around, because I've seen arguments of, and we don't eat a ton of conventional produce anyway, so it doesn't really matter to us, but I've always just wondered it. That you look at the toxicity charts or levels, and it says not that toxic for you, and it's right below like sugar or something like that, and you go down to nicotine or caffeine, and those are more on the toxicity chart. So I've always just wanted to, I guess, get a better, or maybe just your opinion of what glyphosate, like, is it really that bad for you?
Yeah.
If you're washing your vegetables off and things like that.
Yeah, it's that bad for you. And it's, when you look at those charts and stuff, consider the funding. It's interesting. This week I saw a commercial. They're going hard right now to say glyphosate is good, is not bad for the environment or not bad for you. There's a new Roundup commercial, and it's like, portrayed in a savior sort of way, and it's just not. I mean, glyphosate. In my book, I show a study where glyphosate was causally found in court to be causal of psoriasis in a person. 2 years ago, there was a guy in California that glyphosate was causally was found causal in the courts to cause his Hodgkin's lymphoma, and they had to pay out for him. He was a guy who had been a landscaper for a school for like 20 years or 30 years, whatever. So it's not, it is essentially an antibiotic. It's an herbicide in our body. It's an antibiotic, and it's everywhere. It's ubiquitous. If we test water, it's there. If we test air, it's there. If we test ground and food in your blood, it's there. And so it is toxic in that it's an antibiotic, and an antibiotic is wiping out our microbiome. So if we're consistently consuming it, we're consistently having to fight this battle that we're discussing today. It's shown to deplete serotonin. It's shown to, so therefore it depletes melatonin, because melatonin comes from serotonin. It affects vitamin D. I write all about it in chapter 1 of my book, but a researcher to read is Dr. Stephanie Seneff, Seneff, from MIT. She's written a bunch on it. And, the studies obviously aren't funded by Monsanto. So check her out, but it's not.
She recommends glycine daily to help offset your intake of glycine. I just read an article by her.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, 5 to 10 milligrams of glycine a day.
So does Dr. Klinghoffer too.
I'm sorry?
And Dr. Klinghoffer also recommends glycine.
Yeah, give me 1 second, Bryce. I can pull up a couple of her studies. Here you go. One. So this one is, and I won't read through them or anything, just in interest of time, but evidence that glyphosate is a causative agent in chronic subclinical metabolic acidosis and mitochondrial dysfunction. Here's another one. Can you see that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Glyphosate pathways to modern diseases, celiac disease and gluten intolerance. That's a 26-page study she does. Here's biological water dynamics and entropy. I'm sorry, that's just an article she did. That's not necessarily glyphosate, but anything she puts out, you should read. She's amazing.
Okay. Cool.
Here you go.
Conversation that I've dug into a little bit here and there. It's just really mixed reviews, and you're right. It's just who's behind the article, who's behind the argument, and they both make compelling arguments. So
yeah. I mean, here's one: glyphosate suppression of liver enzymes and amino acid biosynthesis by the gut. So pathways to modern disease, and she's talking about It causes sulfate deficiency, and she thinks it's tied to autism. She thinks it's tied to ADD and ADHD. These are really good. You know, here's the serotonin, melatonin stuff I was talking about. If you increase kynurenine, that's a pro-inflammatory neurotoxicity pathway. So again, neurons exploding, autism, that sort of thing we've talked about before. So check her out. Glyphosate usage in the US, 2001, 90 million pounds. 2007, doubled, so 2020, who knows what they're using now. And again, this is worldwide. Most common herbicide used in the US since 2001, blah, blah, blah. But it's not good for you.